Good afternoon. Welcome to Dance, Politics, and Gender, an exploration of new work with Leila Mire. This event is part of the Mason Arts at Home initiative, which endeavors to bring the arts to you, creating community during this time of separation. Leila Mire is a 2020 recipient of the Young Alumni Commissioning Award, which is an award given to select alumni to support the creation of new work. Her project, Still in Creation, will be a focal point of the discussion today and will be premiered at some point on campus during the 2020-21 academic year. Good afternoon, Leila. It's wonderful to see you again. I hope, yes, thank you. Great. Leila, I love the 20,000, right? I think this is how long this world is lasting right now, is that I want to go to 20,000 instead of 2020. So you graduated in 2018 as a dance major from the Honors College. And I know you've had a very, very busy choreographic teaching and performing career, but could you bring us up to date just a little bit more from yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I graduated in 2018 and I stuck around for a year. I danced with Clancy Works and in Silk Road Dance Company for a little bit. And after that, I performed with the One Journey Festival. I got really invested in exploring contemporary and Arabic dance. So I later moved to New York City, where I'm teaching with Dance Wave and Artists Striving to End Poverty, in addition to creating work of my own and performing in some freelance work as well.
So how did you hear about this commissioning grant? Are you still in touch, or was there an email sent out, or what was the communication?
Yeah, I reached out through Facebook. I saw it. I saw Karen post a young alumni all about it. And so I thought I would apply. I had recently been doing some research in Arabic and contemporary dance and orientalism. So I thought it would be a good avenue to pursue.
Well, that brings us to this project itself. Is there a title, and sort of where are you in this process? Or give us an overview.
Yeah, of course. So my piece is called Scheherazade Retold. So for those of you unfamiliar with the ballet Scheherazade, it's a 1910 ballet done by the Ballet Russe. So it is basically the epitome of Orientalism in ballet. And it is loosely based off of 1001 Arabian Nights. So I'm taking that story and I am exploring within it, kind of giving Scheherazade a new voice within the actual ballet itself. And I'm trying to explore how Orientalism has a history within the ballet world and seeing how we can make reparations within that.
That seems like a pretty large project to take you on. How did this all start? This interest in Scheherazade and Orientalism. I'm thinking, of course, of dance history, where you were a student of mine, and the Scheherazade by Fokine in 1910. So I'm sure that was not probably the initiative of what you were wanting to work on. But, I know that you wrote a paper also. So maybe perhaps tell us about that, or how your interest was started.
No, I love it. My whole career is owed to Linda Miller.
I don't think so.
I'm Lebanese American. I had been dealing with certain typecasting and things like that for quite a while. And I was interested in the Nutcracker. I wrote my research on Orientalism and the perpetuation of racist stereotypes in the Nutcracker, which went on to be published in the George Mason Review. Right. So I was studying the Arabian Dance within the Nutcracker, and that kind of propelled later works that I created. In fact, my most recent work was kind of a satirical take. I did it with my partner, and we created this piece on Orientalism and its reflection in pop culture. So that kind of spearheaded it. And then from here, I've kind of taken it in new directions and been exploring that.
Well, it might be interesting for our audience to see perhaps some of your earlier choreographic work. And I'm thinking, of course, of the last work that I was your mentor for, in Harris Theater before you graduated. Can we take a look at Wawi? Oh, okay. That's a really short version. Okay. But the music sounds Middle Eastern. Sounds like a Middle Eastern drum called a Doombeck. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes by Doombeck, Daburka, Darburka.
And
yeah, so that drum is.
Okay, Leila, I'm not hearing you too well.
Okay. Oh, okay. Got it. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. Before I forget, I would like to encourage people to comment your own questions, because later on in the discussion, there will be a chance to answer any lingering questions you all might have. But in regards, in regards to that piece, the Doombeck was, it's a goblet-sized drum that's used commonly in the Middle East and all throughout the region. And I chose to do a piece, a Debki piece that kind of combined contemporary dance forms with a classic Levantine region dance. And the title is actually refers to the leader of a Debki. So it's basically usually a male, but it's the person who leads the group and determines the rhythm, determines the steps, anything of that nature. So I thought it would be interesting to use an all-female cast to kind of explore a dance that isn't just a folk dance, but also a symbol of resistance, a symbol of culture, a symbol of unity, but also going against the status quo when the government actions aren't appropriate at the time. I thought it was important to put on a Western stage.
Wow. I know that underlying all of your work is your Middle Eastern background, and that's very important to you. And we've talked about this a little before, but what do you mean by stereotype of Middle Eastern? Is there a generic, or there's some really common things that people can think about when you traditionally, like in the Nutcracker, the Arabian Dance? I would bet that the majority of our audience would not see that as a negative reflection on Middle Eastern culture. But from your viewpoint, it actually is in most cases, as is currently choreographed. Could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think the fantastic imaginings, the fact that Western viewers have the opportunity to have imagining control over the East is in and of itself pretty dangerous. But also there are some stereotypes that I think outside of ballet, it would be pretty much understood that it is not acceptable. A frequent thing you'll see in the Arabian Dance would be a lot of thievery. There's a lot of like stealing grapes, lots of sensual movement. Essentially, anytime the ballet world wants to explore sexuality and eroticism, they use the Middle East to use it as like kind of a masquerade to be able to explore it. So if they want to be sexual, that means that they have to masquerade themselves without the social consequences that they would otherwise experience in Western Europe.
Well, I think the 1910 version of Scheherazade actually proves a lot of what you're just talking about. It was a ballet that appealed to the audience because of the sex and violence that was projected in that. Even Nijinsky, whose body was painted gold and came leaping out of his cage as the favorite slave, created, I think, history for a lot of people, even though not so many people saw that ballet, but it really created a mystique about him that lasted forever. And the ballet Scheherazade was a part of that. When you think about the movement of the work that you're about to embark on, is there a movement source for you? I know you're doing research. How does that actually leap from the research page, so if you speak, to actually something in the studio?
I think a big part of that is recognizing that basically Oriental dance has been very much westernized, but also a lot of the dance has absorbed other traditional dances. So rock sharky, which is essentially belly dance. It's not traditionally called belly dance, but in the West, people saw it and they called it belly dance, and so people went with it. But it would actually be Oriental dance or country dance. But the actual dance itself did take in certain aspects of folk dances from other areas too. So as westernized as it may be, it still has elements, and if you kind of research and dig into it, you can find what aspects of that are actually worth salvaging.
So some of the movement that you're incorporating is actual Middle Eastern folk dances, which I'm assuming is not belly dance. I was interested to hear where that title came from and who brought that symbolic thing for all of us. I mean, belly dancing is what else would you call it? You called it something different, I think.
Rock sharky.
Okay. And that does not, okay. And the costume for belly dance, was that a traditional thing as well? Is that where the whole scheherazade bare midriff thing came from?
The bare midriffs are interesting because scheherazade certainly embraces that. I think that has a lot to do with the obsession with the harem. For background, for context, a harem is a private space, and the West kind of took it as an area to imagine otherwise conservative women being scantily clad and undressed, and this kind of haven for men to have their way with libidinous women. So the harem is a big obsession. If you have actually seen the Ballet Russe version, it doesn't even take the frame story. So it's interesting. Scheherazade never actually appears in the Ballet Russe's version.
Right.
So the actual story, it's all about this man who gets cheated on, and he is a king, and he decides that he never wants to be cheated on again. So he's going to marry a different woman every day and then kill her at night so that he's never cheated on. And then Scheherazade comes in the original tale, and she comes in and tells him a story every single night. And she leaves him on a cliffhanger so that he can't kill her because he wants to know the end of the story.
Right.
So what the Ballet Russe did was they took the story of Zobeida, the woman who cheated, and they only emphasized the orgy. So really the ballet is just a massive orgy. It doesn't even get to Scheherazade. So the actual title is pretty misleading.
But it's a familiar title because almost everyone is familiar with that tale, right? So I'm sure that was probably Diaghilev himself who had something to do with that title. Do you think that Leon Bach's designs for set and costume, the exotic colors, were sort of a part of the mystique that carried forward from that period of time?
I always have to wonder whether Leon Bach's contribution was the biggest of all. I would say so. I know that a lot of reviews referred to it as barbaric splendor.
Right.
And it created this whole Orientalism in vogue. You saw it in fashion.
Right.
Gertrude Hoffmann tried to create a vaudeville version, completely copying all of his designs. I mean, it flopped because it wasn't done as well, but it got copied anywhere from concert dance to burlesque shows.
Right. So in your work, you plan on doing this, I think, for school children after the George Mason premiere. I know you've been teaching kids, and I'm interested to hear how you would take this work, which is, I mean, really sex and violence, even if you're not going to dance it that way. Scheherazade, this is a tale about sex and violence, and transfer that to an educational tool for kids?
I think one of the biggest themes, reading all the tales and even the ones that have been translated later on, one of the biggest takeaways is the power of storytelling, which I think resonates in everybody. And so I think that it would lend itself really well to children. So I'm thinking that I will use elements of the piece to create little vignettes for children to understand in kind of smaller doses. So just in the way that Scheherazade tells a story each night and is able to, in the end, spoiler alert, in the end, she convinces the king, the error of his ways, through all of these parables that she essentially teaches him. And he falls in love with her and her stories, and she saves the whole kingdom. So she's really a heroine. So I'm thinking that I can use this as an opportunity to kind of edify on Arabic dance and culture,
Right.
teaching in school programs. My last program that I taught a dead ski class. And I came in with all these history lessons, and the biggest thing was, where is the Middle East? And we spent the entire semester teaching them where it was, because all of them thought it was in Jamaica, and they were very confident in that. So just offering some geography would be great to start.
Wow, that's great. I want to encourage, as Leila said earlier in the program, we are going to come to answering questions. And I know some of your former classmates or dance majors, Leila, are watching today. This is normally the time for our dance history class. So I'm pretty sure they're out there. So I'd like to encourage those people to ask questions if there's something else that you want to know with regards to the conversation that we're having. Orientalism. You keep talking about that, and I know that you've done a study of that, but can you give a description in lay terms of what that encompasses for you as you look at this project?
So Orientalism was developed by Edward Said. He was really ahead of his time. He came out in the 1970s. He's a Palestinian-American writer, and he came up with this idea that essentially the Western world is using the Middle East to create this fantastic imagination of what the East is like. And they do so to press their colonialistic ideas. I believe he said, the Orient is the stage in which the whole East is confined. So it's just this temporal drag that is created, and it gives imagining control over all of the Islamic countries.
Well, I know that it's been something that has been a focus of our field, dance, for many, many years. And one of the earliest works that actually Marius Petipa choreographed was so risque because he wanted them to be in bare feet. This is a ballet that was created after Isadora had visited Russia in 1905 and was dancing in bare feet. And so Petipa wanted to do this piece. And actually, I take that back. It was Michel Fouquin. And so he created this work that was influenced by Isadora. And he wanted to have bare feet on the dancers, and it was not allowed at that time. So they actually had costumes where they painted the toes of the dancers. So they weren't in point shoes, but they painted the bare feet so as not to sort of be too risque for the norm in those days. So you're saying Orientalism is still going big and strong, and that this work that you're going to put together, and I'm going to get to how you think you're going to do this under the current circumstances where you can't be live in a studio. I mean, normally you would be there with your dancers, correct? Mm-hmm. In the same space. And maybe this is putting you on the spot. I think there's a lot of people who are trying to solve this problem right now. But today, if you had to create this work and get started, how would you begin?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm I'm literally just doing as much research as I possibly can about the general topic. I've started doing some unorthodox things. Maybe they'll prove fruitful, maybe not. Where I'm doing improvisational studies and things like that, and I'm doing a lot of videoing. I think this is a major issue for people experiencing COVID, also with just planning. Who are your collaborators going to be? Who's still going to live in New York? When am I going to get back to New York? I'm in Tennessee right now. So it's certainly something that has become an unforeseen challenge for a lot of us.
In terms of the dancing, have you selected music for this work yet?
I'm currently in the process. Scheherazade is, well, 1001 Arabian Nights in general is the basis of the Western novel. So there's a reason that there's all this music source. There's scheherazade from Skip Martin. There's John Adams, Scheherazade .2. There is Rimsky-Korsakov's original material.
Right.
There's Alonzo Lyons King's version with Zakir Hussain. So I'm kind of trying to mash these all up and kind of use different elements of them. And there's so much to pull from, it's a little hard to narrow down right now. That's kind of where I'm at. But
you're not thinking of using text, right? Live text or dancers speaking or anything like that. You're not seeing this as a multidisciplinary or with video and all of the different things that are involved in technology right now.
Right now, I'm anticipating using a good amount of dancers' voices, just because I am interested in the role of storytelling and kind of getting that across. I think that a lot of ballets, if they're not done very well, they can be very confusing unless you know the libretto. So I want to make sure that audiences know what's going on.
So you don't see a libretto. You're not going to actually put a program note that this is based on 1001 Nights, or do you see that you need to explain?
I think if anything, I would need to explain the background of Scheherazade, just because I don't know that everybody knows that ballet, and they're super familiar. I was always kind of a nerd when it came to dance history, but I recognize that not everyone does.
I know. I'm thinking of some of the conversations that we had prior to this this TV broadcast. So anything that I've left out that you would like to talk about in terms of this work? I know we have one more video clip to go to, which is the work that you talked about in New York.
Yeah. So the next piece will be, it is called Arab and fucking esque, not your sexy harem girls. And it was done in collaboration with my friend and collaborator, Nadia Carella. And we created this as a kind of reflection on Orientalism and pop culture. We use riffs that match up. So we use the original Nutcracker music, which a little backstory on that. The Arabian Dance was previously not referred to as the Arabian Dance. It's actually hard for us to find sources that go to when it became known as the Arabian Dance. But it was done to a Georgian lullaby, and that was actually used for sick children. And then over time it was changed over to the music that we know now. And a lot of the common riffs that you'll notice in it are also present in the pop culture, a lot of Britney Spears, a lot of things like that. So this is a reflection on that.
Okay, so can we go to the video Arab-esque? Wow. So was that at a theater in New York? Tell me where that was performed.
So this was originally created for the Yellow Punk Festival in Philadelphia.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and after we performed that, we were invited to perform at Mod Arts Dance Festival, which is where this video material came from. And it was a performance for artists of color. And so we created this piece, and we were able to tour it a little bit all over New York. So
including the title, right?
Yes, including the title. And I'm thinking about it. I think my Sippy is in the audience. I'm a little worried now.
Oh, who was in the audience?
My great aunt.
Well, okay. You did put your hand up there when you were talking about the title. So I think we're okay. So we're back to this project, and we have this idea of Scheherazade revisited. You've talked about the research going into this. Do you have an idea for costumes, or have you not gone that far? I mean, do you have an overall picture of what you think this piece will look like?
You know, it's tricky. I had a picture, and then COVID happened.
I see.
But I am still, I think it's kind of nice because it's allowing me to test out whether those ideas were the best. Oh. And okay, yeah, my sister said yes, Siti's watching. but yes, I think it's a little tricky to navigate this space. I'm trying to plan as well as I can, right. But I mean, I don't even know when the university is going to reopen, so it's right. a little tricky in that respect.
Right. So to keep our audience involved here, when you made your other works, was there any improvisation from your dancers? I mean, some choreographers come into the studio with set steps and vocabulary. Is that you? Or do you work with your dancers to so they can help you bring out the vision for the movement?
I would say normally in the past, I would generally come in with an idea or an image, but with these kinds of dances, I would definitely come in with set steps because not all my dancers are familiar with folk dances. But now moving forward, I think that we'll rely a lot more on improvisation, just given the circumstance of COVID.
Well, you know, from history, you remember we talked about Remy Charlotte, who was an artist, visual artist, who mailed out instructions to various dancers. And each dancer then created a work based on his description and in some cases, pictures. Is that something that you think about in this particular time? I mean, or are you going to be able to instruct your dancers with the same kind of background and research that you've been doing, or will it be necessary?
I think it's absolutely necessary. I don't think that I'll rely on a UPS right now, but I do think that I know that I call my friends and collaborators and I lecture them and go on rants. I think they probably zone out a lot, but I definitely think it's important to know the context of it before they perform it and participate in it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm thinking maybe it's just about time to go for some questions. I understand that we've got quite a few. Okay, here's one from Amelia Stork. Go, Leila, this is yours.
Yeah, I actually think this is a great question. So the question is, how do you feel Western audiences have responded to your pieces that are inspired by Middle Eastern culture? My last piece, we talked about this a lot just because originally our piece was created for Yellow Punk, which was a multidisciplinary festival for the Swana populations. So they were all familiar with Orientalism. Now they might not have been familiar with dance, but they knew Orientalism. And then when we performed it for audiences that were not familiar with Orientalism, but were familiar with dance, we actually found it interesting because people aren't aware of the nuances Orientalism. So that did require a lot of feedback, and we brought somebody in different each rehearsals from different backgrounds to make sure that it was being read correctly. So I think that's a really big thing that we have to consider.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, great. Here's another one.
Do you imagine a specific audience when choreographing your work? How does that complicate how you engage your process? Yeah, I absolutely do. I think that's one of the hardest things, is imagining your audience and trying to find something that will reach everyone. In teaching, we talk about pedagogically having entry points. So an entry point is being able to reach somebody on different levels without boring somebody that might be more advanced. So I try to cater my work to be able to reach somebody that has absolutely no knowledge of the material, and also be able to make a poignant point about somebody that is better versed in the material.
Okay. Really, thank you.
Hey, Ollie. How large is this work going to be? Number of dancers, collaborators, length of work. Are you looking for a role? I'm not actually sure at this moment in time. I was thinking that when I applied, I initially had an idea for around 5 dancers, and I had a number of collaborators lined up. But since then, I'm not really sure who's going to be in New York or when we're going to be able to be in a space together. So a lot of that is undetermined right now.
Right. So the title of this broadcast is Dance, Politics, and Gender. So we've talked a little bit in terms of politics. Do you think politically about this work and its reception? I know the question Western audiences, and you talked a little bit about people familiar with Orientalism, but how do you think this particular work would play, for instance, over in Lebanon, were you to take your dancers and travel there?
Yeah, I think that in Lebanon, it would probably be received pretty favorably. I think they're more familiar with Orientalism, but that is to say that Lebanon has a little bit of looser rules in regards to that. I would say that it's interesting. I was recently at an APAP conference that was talking about presenting Arab dance and Arab dancers, and a lot of it was frustrating because the panelists were white and did not seem as informed as the audience, and the audience was asking really great questions, and they weren't answering in ways that suggested that they were well versed in the material. So I think that it's important that it's made accessible to all audiences, because I think you'd be surprised at who it actually does reach.
Right. Good. Do we have another question? Great. Hi, Erin.
Yes, of course, Erin. So imaginary control over the Middle Easter. That means that essentially the control over how we see the Middle East is maintained by the West. So, for instance, I was listening to a seminar on Cleopatra from Shakespeare, and he was talking about how, Shakespeare had never been to the Middle East, but he had full imagining control, and he got to create this vision and this idea of what everybody else is associating to the Middle East to a Western audience, and they were all assuming that it was correct. Like, for instance, he talked about Cleopatra and her beauty, whereas in the Middle East, you know Cleopatra as the most intelligent woman and just brilliant and a powerhouse. But here, she's kind of just reduced to being beautiful. And in doing that, it takes away from the actual power that she has, and it reimagines the Middle East as this place where, Cleopatra goes after all these men. She also led an army, but nobody talks about that.
Right.
So that imagining control shapes how we see the Middle East.
Good. Elizabeth Taylor, I presume, right? Oh, Dean Davis. Thank you. Leila.
Can you tell us about your collaborative team? Yes, of course. So I'm currently working with a great team that's coming from kind of all parts of the world. But it's important to me that I work with a group that is very well versed in Orientalism. I think it's important not only to create work, but to create responsible work. I think everyone says, like, just get out there and create, but you need to do so, and you need to do it informed. So my team comes from predominantly Swana, Mina areas, and is familiar with the material.
So do you already have, are you going to use a set for this piece?
You know, I would love to, but I'm still very uncertain about who's going to be in New York.
Well, let's take the uncertainty away. Let's talk about your dream piece for the last few minutes of the show that we have, and we'll take the rest of the questions. But if you were going to have anything at your fingertips, right, what would the set look like?
Okay, I would definitely have a budget like the Ballet Russe did. And I think I would use elements of the original Ballet Russe set, but only to point out the imagined rendering of other within it. So they use lots of bright colors, which is accurate, but also you know, there's this whole harem setup. I go through the actual original sketches of the material, and it's pretty fantastic. It's you know, everybody's seated, and it's all around this stocky vizier who's an idiot, and they're tricking him and stealing his keys, and so that she can have sex with this like really hot guy who dances really androgynously, and that is something unfamiliar to the audience. And there's all these rumors about what Nijinsky actually did in the piece. Some people say that he did a headstand, all kinds of things. So I would use a set that is elaborate in the sense that it points to the past, because I think it's important to also recognize Orientalism and the role it's had.
Right.
Now, I think that brings up the issue of legitimation and whether or not edifying it and just doing something very traditional would necessarily refer back to the imagined rendering that was created.
But in some ways, it might set people up to listen to the story of Scheherazade, if there's sort of a traditional Western imagination at play. I'd like to take some more questions before we run out of time. Yeah. Can you see?
Yes, I can. From Alia. Wonderful. You mentioned you're in the process of selecting music. Are you imagining a modified version of the original music or something completely different? That's something I've been playing around with several ideas for. I've even looked at transcribing music and putting it on different instruments. But I also want to add a new voice, and there's a lot that's been done already with the material Scheherazade. So I want to make sure I add to that. So my answer is I'm playing with it, but I'm not married to it.
Okay. We have about 2 minutes, and I think we have a couple questions more. Yeah?
Actually, from Nadia. How was Middle Eastern music and dance a part of your life growing up? And at what point did you first integrate it with your contemporary dance work?
Good question.
I'll start from the bottom and go up. Yeah. So contemporary dance, it first started getting into my contemporary dance practice, I would say, mostly in college. That was mostly where I started choreographing for the first time, really. And I originally started that with Laui, but I also took belly dance in college, and then I had grown up with several dance forms. And then I think also aesthetically, there were certain ideas that I always kind of grew up with, and that was something that we kind of navigate as part of the identity. I think I traditionally was casted in certain roles. If there was a hijab, I was in it, whether it made sense or not.
In Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have one last question and then we'll have to wrap up.
How do you leverage collaborations with other MENA artists? I think that's a really great question. For those of you wondering, MENA is an acronym that stands for Middle East North African Artists. So I think that's really important. It's important that we do leverage, but also this is, I'll admit, one of my first major projects that I've been a part of. So I think that's something that I'm going to continue navigating, and I don't think I have an answer at this given point. I think I always have a lot of questions and never a lot of answers. But that's a great point. I'm going to continue exploring that.
I think that's about all of the time we have for today. Leila, thank you for your time today and for a fantastic conversation. Make sure you stay tuned for Leila's future performance of this piece sometime next year. Thank you to the Friends of the School of Dance, Mason Arts at Home, and the estate of Linda E. Gramlich for the support of the Young Alumni Commissioning Project. Stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.